After watching the news, have you ever wondered when all the violence that plagues humanity began? When was the first war? While people have most likely been fighting each other for millennia, did you know historians say the first war occurred in 2700 BCE? Sumer and Elam fought the first war in Mesopotamia, and Sumer was the first victor in history, although they would not be the last. Warfare is one of the most impactful factors in human history. It has shaped countries and irrevocably impacted lives. Some aspects of war have been constant through the years, such as violence and fighting over resources and power. However, other changes have left the world reeling. Throughout history, people have searched for ways to build better weaponry to defeat their enemies, leading to millennia of changes as people progressed from stones to metal to guns to atomic bombs. Warfare continues to change today as militaries work on self-flying drones. But as the world changes around us, it is essential to look back at all the changes that have impacted how we currently fight wars. Looking back, we can understand why people have been driven to invent for the battlefield and appreciate the technological advances that have shaped the modern world. What were the first weapons used in warfare? Historians believe people used weapons for thousands of years before the first war occurred. Weapons were an essential part of hunting. The first were made of wood and stone. Ancient people discovered stone was usually a more deadly implement than wood. Hence, they began to fashion stone tips and arrowheads. The earliest arrowheads date from more than 60,000 years ago. The popularity of stone tools is what gives the Stone Age its name, and it lasted from around 30,000 BCE to 3000 BCE. Bows and arrows appear to have been popular amongst early humans. Historians have found evidence of this type of weapon in Africa, Denmark, Egypt, and China, to name a few locations. The structure was simple enough to adapt to local vegetation and gave people a broader range. People also used spears, javelins, and slings for hunting, and all of these weapons could be used for military purposes with deadly results. However, the first weapon created for war was the club, which later evolved into the mace. A mace is a rock attached to a handle, used to smash flesh and bone. The stone is usually small enough to be held in one hand, but the handle gives the wielder increased power and velocity. Historians believe maces were first created in the Chalcolithic period, or early in the Bronze Age. They appear to have given people difficulty at first. Attaching a rock to a handle was more difficult than we might initially think, so well-made maces were rare. Of course, warfare and weaponry completely changed after humans discovered how to smelt metals. As the Copper and Bronze Ages accelerated, the mace was also one of the first military uses for metal. People cast mace heads in copper to increase their density and deadliness. Metal had been used for decorative reasons before, but historians place the copper mace heads as one of the first critical military weapons to use metal. Aside from ceremonial and ornamental items, ancient metalsmiths focused most of their attention on making weapons. People soon developed chariots, swords, helmets, and armor, and they learned base metals, such as bronze and iron, were more substantial than precious metals like gold, electrum, and silver. For thousands of years, metal weapons remained the most popular and effective. Swords and spears were critical to Alexander the Great, the Roman Empire, and the knights of the Middle Ages. Although the particulars of each metal item in warfare evolved over the many years they were used, metal remained a critical part of human warfare for hundreds of years. However, as people traded goods and ideas along the Silk Road, they soon stumbled across a new military technology that would change how people handled wars forever: gunpowder. When did guns become part of warfare? Gunpowder was the first human-made explosive in the world, and the Chinese were the first to invent it. Historians believe gunpowder may have been created in the mid-first millennium CE, although the first undisputable written evidence comes from the 9th century during the Tao dynasty, which referred to it as fire medicine. It was a mixture of carbon, sulfur, and potassium nitrate, which at the time, when people were fascinated by alchemy, impressed people across the globe. At first, the Chinese used their gunpowder in firework displays, but by 1000 CE, the Chinese military had begun applying it to existing weaponry. They used gunpowder to create fire arrows and spears with an explosive element activated upon hitting their targets. They also used gunpowder to fire off large groups of arrows at once without needing a bow. The increased use of explosives added more power to Chinese militaries, especially as the country went through political instability during this time. Beginning in the 12th century, the Chinese began using primitive hand grenades, rockets, and cannons. One invention called the fire lance used a spear backed with gunpowder and, later on, sharp debris like broken pottery that flew out upon impact. While most historians do not consider the fire lance to be the first gun, it helped push the Chinese in that direction. By 1280 CE, the Chinese invented the first guns called hand cannons. It was a metal tube with an ignition chamber for powder. Some even had wooden handles to make them easier to carry. They were terrifying weapons, but like other inventions in warfare, they soon spread to other countries. Historians believe the first guns arrived in Western Europe around 1330 CE, although they more closely resembled how we think of cannons today. Gunpowder traveled along the Silk Road, spreading to the Arab traders before passing on to the Europeans. However, guns did not completely overhaul the medieval era's military tactics. Early cannons were difficult and dangerous to use. Traditional weapons like the bow and arrow were safer, faster, and not as dependent upon the weather. These cannons became a critical part of breaking sieges, though. Siege warfare was a crucial part of medieval warfare, and a well-stocked, well-supplied enemy could reasonably hold a fortress or walled city for months. Traditional bows and arrows could not break through the walls. While medieval militaries had developed other siege equipment to attack walls and take cities, the cannon's power was impossible to ignore. It could break through walls and destroy castles, ending medieval warfare and helping usher in the Renaissance, which had its own war style. As firearms continued to develop, European inventors began working on handheld guns. They soon learned how to create guns that strike their own sparks, making them self-igniting. This process made guns safer for the user, more reliable, and easier to build. Muskets became increasingly popular, which had the interesting effect of doing away with medieval body armor. Even early muskets could break through 4 millimeters of steel, making plate armor irrelevant. Of course, armor did not immediately vanish. Some attempted to make it bulletproof by thickening key areas, such as helms and breastplates. Not everyone could afford that, though, and the poorer soldiers soon discarded their armor, which ushered in the modern tradition of wearing uniforms into battle instead of armor. The early modern era saw warfare with uniformed armies and firearms that became increasingly accurate, increasing the death toll in battles throughout the 1700s and 1800s. However, gunpowder was not the last great invention to change warfare. The modern age has seen further military changes that have left the international community reeling from the possible consequences. How has modern technology changed warfare yet again? Although there have been many changes to warfare throughout the modern era, some of the most impactful occurred during the World Wars. World War I saw several changes in war techniques as people used trenches in abundance. The war also made prominent use of machine guns, although they had been invented in the 1860s. The First World War also allowed military leaders to develop new battle strategies. Planes with machine guns and tanks were first used prominently during this war as well. The planes made control of the skies a new and critical part of warfare. Although the first iterations were unreliable, the tanks offered increased mobility because of their treads. People continued to improve tanks, which played a more significant role in World War II and other military engagements since. World War I shocked the world with its death toll and violence. The carnage left soldiers shell-shocked as new inventions, such as chemical warfare, found new ways to maim and kill enemy soldiers without even needing to see them. However, one of the most impactful changes in international warfare occurred during World War II with the creation of the atomic bomb. Scientists had been studying atoms for several hundred years, learning about radioactive elements and working to split the nucleus of an atom, called nuclear fission. Scientists in the 1930s made significant steps toward atomic chain reactions. Lise Meitner was the first scientist to split the nucleus of uranium atoms purposefully. She had worked with Otto Hahn, a German chemist, but was forced to flee to Sweden as the Nazi regime took control of Germany. Despite Meitner's departure, the Germans possessed the key to creating nuclear weapons at the brink of World War II. The United States leaped into action. Both countries began working to develop atomic weapons first, knowing this new technology would change warfare once again. The Manhattan Project began after Japan's Pearl Harbor attack in 1941. American scientists already had confirmation from their British counterparts that a uranium-based bomb was possible, but there were still limited resources, necessitating military assistance. Much like other discoveries throughout human history, such as smelting metal and using gunpowder, the need to find new weapons and be successful in warfare drove the development of nuclear fission. The Manhattan Project cost around $2.2 billion. During its run, scientists built the first self-sustaining nuclear reactor, discovered plutonium was more radioactive than uranium, and finally made the first atomic bomb. It was unique because of how rare plutonium was, and because it relied upon an implosion method, which was different from other bombs at the time. Earlier bombs relied upon a bullet to hit the explosive material, but scientists believed plutonium would be more effective using an implosion-based bomb. Scientists on the Manhattan Project tested their creation on July 16, 1945, in the Trinity test. They set up at the bombing range near Alamogordo, New Mexico, and the test was more successful than they had initially hoped for. The blast was so powerful it evaporated the steel tower used to suspend the test bomb, left a crater 30 feet wide and 5 feet deep, and melted the sand around the site. The scientists were shocked. Never before had humanity created a weapon capable of such mass destruction. The United States military dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan to end World War II. But creating the nuclear bomb did more than ensure an Allied victory. It also pushed the world into the atomic age and started the Cold War. People now feared nuclear warfare, and international tensions centered around controlling who had access to this new power. The world is still working through the implications of living in a nuclear age, but the drive for more powerful weapons in warfare has not ceased. Militaries worldwide continually improve their equipment, create better weapons, and strengthen their surveillance. Like many other parts of human history, warfare will constantly be changing. Every significant change has pushed the world into new eras, inadvertently creating new social and political issues. Looking back at how war has changed through the years, we can glimpse how we may continue to grow in the future and how our conflicts have shaped societies and continue to impact our lives today. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the history of warfare, check out our Captivating History book series, available as ebooks, paperbacks, and audiobooks. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.